Hey, thanks for checking out my channel. Make sure you subscribe and enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Nezzy's Place podcast, where truth lives. I am your host, Vanessa Davis, and welcome to the show. You know, Nezzy's Place is going to always give you positivity, encouragement, inspiration, and motivation. So if you need some of that in your life, make sure you subscribe and also share the link. You know, I need to take a deep breath to talk about the topic tonight because it may be a little heart wrenching, revealing, and maybe even a little bit hard to digest. But it is a well needed conversation for us. Over the past few months, we can all agree that our current climate of our country has been extremely divisive. Has it always been that way? Yes, but now it's more prevalent than ever. White people, not all, have been known to disregard and hate Black people. So I needed a white person to help me understand, why do they hate us? Joining me today is Dave Shute, who I met on Facebook. And if you haven't seen any of his videos, I will certainly add the link so you can take a look for yourself. Dave is the most transparent, forthright, tell it like it is, no matter what guy. I connected with him because I value what he had to say. So you will get to meet him and understand why I invited him on the show. And my next guest, who will be joining us later on in the show, is Shauna Barrow. Shauna and I are viewers of Dave's videos, and we both like his topics because we know he is telling the truth and he is not afraid to say it. So you will be hearing from her as well. But we're going to jump right in. Well, thank you for being on the show, Dave. I am so glad we're able to do this show this evening. And boy, do we have a lot to unpack. So we're going to jump right in. Don't you think so? Let's jump right in. We don't want to waste any time. So we all know, we have seen it, we've read it, we've lived it, we've witnessed it. And I believe that this time is just a new time and different people, but things haven't changed. We have the same issues from the past. It's just new people, right? New day, new people, but the same issues. So we see it every day. We see racism every day. So my question to you is, why is there so much hate for the African American people?
You know, I in a short answer is I don't know. In the long, in-depth answer, there's a lot of things that we can look at. And you and I met through social media. We've communicated quite a bit the last few months, talked quite a bit the last few months. I'm very outspoken about it. When Donald Trump announced he was going to run for president back before the election in 2016, I was talking to my oldest daughter one night, and I'm like, this is not good. Like, this is really, really, really not good. She goes, what do you mean? I go, this guy's about to try to take us back to the 50s and the 60s. Like, I could just tell. I guess, I grew up in Mississippi. Now, I knew at a very young age, 12, 13 years old, literally, that I was getting out of there first opportunity I had. But I've grown up around racism. I tell people all the time, my mother's probably the biggest racist that I've ever known. And by the time I was 12 and 13, I was arguing with her about things that she said, and different conversations, whether it was politics or social issues or just everyday life. I was like, oh, what? You just hear stuff as a kid. When you're younger, you don't understand it. It's racism is taught, right? It's the problem that we have in this country is that racism is being handed down generation to generation. And that sounds like a very big picture thing. But in reality, the United States of America is a very young country when you look at the entire world. So you're only talking about 5 or 6 generations of people back to when the country was born. You know, it's 7. I throw an extra one in there to be safe. But the point is, it's a very young country. And if I have people tell me all the time. I have a gym friend out here that I've argued with for 4 years about Trump and behavior, and I've called Trump a racist, I think, every chance I've gotten. And the reason that it's bothered me is because you can't have the president of the United States of America making racial remarks all the time. And his supporters will try to argue, oh, he's not racist, he's not racist. All you have to do is listen to what's coming out of his mouth. And the one that I always go back to, and all the political pundits go back to, is Charlottesville, when he referred to and made the statement, well, there's good people on both sides. No, there's not good people on both sides. One side is, the largest, most well-funded, most deadly, most dangerous terror group in the history of the world, and they've killed more people than ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and every other terrorist organization you can name combined. So to me, that's not good people, right? That's terrible coming from the president of the United States. But, the flip side of that I want to point out is this, and what I was going to say, history. You have to understand history and what has gone on in this country and on this continent for the last 260 to 400 years to understand what's happened so that you understand how we got here. Okay. And the problem is that there's so many people out there that don't understand the real history of our country. And I'm talking about, from the time that people first came here from Europe. Okay. And when white people came from Europe and from England, and what happened to Native Americans in North America. I mean, basically what happened to them was pure genocide. I mean, the only difference, they talk about genocide, everybody relates that to what happened in Germany in the 30s and 1930s and 40s. But with, Hitler and what he did to the Jews and, the ovens and Auschwitz and all that stuff. Well, the same thing happened here to Native Americans. The only difference is they were all killed, and the ones that weren't killed, instead of marching them into an oven, they marched them onto reservations and segregated them from society. I mean, it's deplorable what happened to these people. By the way, it was their country.
Exactly. They were here first. Okay?
Yeah, they were here first.
Don't get it twisted. They were here first. That's right. They were here first. And one of the things that, just to kind of segue what you were saying about the land, is when we are told, you guys need to go back. Okay. And I started thinking, well, if we go back, where you guys going? Because
they
were here first. This is not your stuff.
Totally agree. Middle class white America, they think that they have squatters' rights for some reason.
Yes.
But it's just so stupid because, again, I tell people all the time, you see my threads, you see my social media. I got a little bit of a mouth on me and I get after them pretty good. But I tell them all the time, pick up a history book, man. Right. Learn what you're talking about before you start trying to talk about it. It's unbelievable how many people don't know the actual. And what's even more unbelievable is this to me, because I've had this conversation. It's even more unbelievable that people that I've known for most or all of my life that are white middle-class Americans, they don't want to know the history. That's what's scary. They don't want to be bothered with it. They just want it their way.
Right. Well, I do want to touch a little bit on, because when you mentioned that when you were a child, and how you were brought up. And I just find it fascinating how you just didn't adapt to the racist mentality. So how did you navigate that when it was all around you? How did you, not become one of them, quote unquote?
Yeah. So, first of all, I easily probably could have gone the other way. Okay. That's just the reality of my life. My whole family was pretty racist, but one of the things, if you look, so I've seen documentaries where, different people, different, media people are interviewing white supremacists or KKK members. And in some of these documentaries, you see children, right? And these families are raising their children to be racist. But some of the things that they say, and I related to this, I mean, just as a kid and dealing with my own mother, certain things are said, right? And you can see the kids kind of looking at them, kind of like, what are you talking about? Because children don't know skin color. They don't, unless they're taught racism, kids don't know. Okay. Right. And I think for me, I noticed at a very young age, my mom would say certain things, none of which I care to repeat here. But I was like, why are you saying that? Why are you saying that? So, for example, I'll give you a great example. So my mother, her sisters, family originally from Tennessee, East Arkansas. My mother grew up in Oxford, Mississippi. She went to Oxford High School, Ole Miss, Integration, James Meredith, Emmett Till. I mean, again, if you don't know those names, pick up a history book, right? But, she was just kind of brought up in that environment, and she did, as a young woman, I know, got caught up in it. It was all around her. She was bombarded with it. Mm-hmm. And we used to go to football games up there. And I can remember sitting in the stadium next to her, and she would say things, and I'd be like, why? It's like, here's our team. We're pulling for them. Okay. Why would you say something derogatory and nasty like that towards the team that you're supporting? Right. But it was just, I can't explain it. It's just how people were. A lot of people were. I mean, there were a lot of things I heard sitting up in the stadium, in Vaught Hemingway Stadium in Oxford, Mississippi, at an Ole Miss football game. So I thought, I as a kid, I was like, don't say that. That's not right. I didn't understand. My correlation was because it was our team we're pulling for. Why would you say something derogatory towards anyone? And then as I got older, I was able to associate the racism piece into that and what was happening. And unfortunately, I mean, I'm just, I'm sure I'm going to get blasted from somebody from Mississippi. It's still like that for a lot of people.
It's still like that. We're going to continue on with the show. Well, we're going to add in another guest, and we're going to add in Shauna because she just popped in. So we want to welcome her to the show. Hi, Shauna. Yay! Welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you. So glad that you can join us this evening.
I'm glad to be here. I'm very glad to be here, for sure. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to continue on with the conversation. And Dave, go ahead. You were talking about, so you went to school with African-American, and you played on the basketball team, and you did all that. So you totally took a different path. So did you try to change anyone, even at a young age? Did you try to kind of, I don't want to use the word convert, but kind of talk to some of your peers, even if they had that mindset, that racist mindset? Was it in you to kind of, steer them a little bit in the direction of, hey, this is just not right?
Yeah. So let me bring you up to speed on that. My mother pulled me out of the public school system when I was in 4th grade and put me in an all-white private school in Jackson, Mississippi. Okay. And I mean, I didn't know the difference. It was like, you got friends and they're going over here. I didn't know until after I graduated that the private school system that I was put in had been started by the White Citizens Council, if that rings a bell for you. Okay. But it was all I knew. Right. Mm-hmm. But as I got into my young teenage years, my junior high school years, I was going to another side of town to play ball every afternoon. I was taking a lot of heat for that. I was going what they called across the tracks. And I went over there because, number one, I could always depend on, no matter what day of the week, around the same time, there were games going on the outdoor court. So there was always somewhere to go play. And it was in pretty much an all black neighborhood. And I was friends with guys, I went over there to play, and I wanted to go over there and play. Those were the best games and the best runs. And there always was a run, and they respected me for coming over there. They kind of took me in for not being afraid to come over there. And we had family friends and family members. I took heat all the time for going over there and playing ball. Like, what are you doing over there, boy? What are you doing going over there across the tracks? It's like,
I'm
trying to play that ball.
May I ask you a question? May I ask Dave a question? Was your first focus sports then? It wasn't about any kind of color?
No. When I was younger, it was strictly about sports. It was not about color.
But you didn't see any kind of color. You didn't care.
I didn't associate that there was really
sports
a problem until I was probably like dealing with my mother and some of her stuff that I mentioned before you got on, Shauna.
Sure.
But it was all about sports for me. I didn't associate that there was some major problem until I was probably 15 or 16 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Which is when I was starting to drive and I was able to go where I wanted to go to get in games.
Well, that's funny that you said you were able to go where you can go. So, I mean, for years, and Shauna, you can jump in anytime, but for years, we have always been, we've always been marked or, pulled over, or there's always been an issue. So it's been happening for years and years and years. So, even now, just driving down the street, racial profiling and all the different things that Black people go through. And I mean, like we talked about the history, right, of where we have come from. And you would think by now that we would have, leveled up a little bit and everyone would be more equal, but we're still fighting. We're still dealing with the stigma that people say, oh, the white privilege that is out there. But I can't stand that phrase, because to me, in my own mindset, I have just as much privileges as anyone else, regardless. And that's my mindset, but that's not everybody's mindset that doesn't look like me, so why do you think that, that white privilege, where does it play into society today? Because we see it. We see that Black people are disregarded. We see that they are not offered the same type of promotions. They're not offered, loans to buy a home. There's so many different things. They're at a disadvantage. And there's always, I think you had mentioned before about the foot on the neck or something that, is always there. It's like, what do we do to get past that? Because we can't go on like this forever. I mean, we have come a long way.
May I ask you a question? I think you bring up an excellent point. Okay. But Venus, don't you feel at some point Blacks play into our own stereotypes?
Well, that's definitely.
Is that a different podcast altogether?
That's a totally different show, because we have our own issues that we need to address separately. But
that's not what I was saying. That's not what I was saying. But what I was saying is it's almost like we expect to be treated just like you were saying, to not get the home loans, to not get the jobs, to not get the promotions. It's like we fought so hard and we're just like, oh, I guess that's it. I guess
we've been brainwashed.
We might as well just accept it for what it is. Right. And so we kind of, I'm not saying all of us, and that's all the time, but I think we also have to change the definition of how we look at ourselves going through. I mean, I know that there are times.
Can I say something on that? I'm sorry.
Yes, you may. It was a question.
Listen, yes. I'm not the excuse guy for anybody. Okay. Right. But here's the reality. First of all, and V, to your point, I can tell you 1,000,000,000% I have benefited from white privilege. Okay. It doesn't apply to you guys. Okay. But I've benefited from it, and I can sit here and go through different ways that I've benefited from it. One thing, a story I was telling some guys recently, I was playing ball with some guys in a summer league back when I was in high school. And it was 5 of us jumped in a car to go to a summer league game. And I was sitting in the back right-hand corner. And the only reason I was sitting in the back right-hand corner in the back seat at 6'7" was because the guy that was sitting in front of me at the time was like 6'9". So we put him in the front seat. But here, it was, they were all Black American kids, right?
Right.
We got pulled over as we left their neighborhood. Okay. And cop comes up to the window. Hey, what are you guys doing? Where are you going? As soon as he looked in the driver's side window and looked in the car and saw me, his whole demeanor changed. And
Wow.
we're like, hey, we're going to play ball. We got a summer league game over at the air base tonight, da, da, da. And he goes, all right, I just had to check, blah, blah, whatever he said. And, that was it. Now, that's an example of what you're talking about what Black Americans have had to go through and have had to deal with. And I know we're not going to get off track to say, what Black Americans, they have their own things they have to deal with. But here's what I will say for that conversation for the future. It's tough, in my opinion, for any race to do what they have to do and make good, solid decisions and be perfect when they're not playing by the same rules as everybody else. See, that's where it comes into the problem is equality. It was just like segregation in schools, okay? It's like, middle-class white America looks at Black schools and Black neighborhoods and they say, well, they got to do this. They've got every opportunity they could possibly ask for. Well, no, they don't. If you know politics and you know what goes on in local and city and state governments, go check out how much money is going into the white schools and the white neighborhoods historically, okay, versus the Black schools and the Black neighborhoods. And if they'd corrected that problem, what has it been now? 70 years ago, when they started talking about integrating schools and started talking about leveling off education, if they'd taken care of that problem and they'd created a level playing field and true equality, then we wouldn't be where we're at today. That's why I say it's important to know the history.
Yes.
Yeah, we touched on that last time. Remember, separate but equal, but we're all in the same school together. And yet, white kids went to the upper reading courses and the Black kids were in the remedial reading courses within the same school. Exactly. So, I mean, this is at a very early age that we are systematically tracked into being into having this definition of ourselves. We're taught to have that definition at a very early age.
And I want to answer your question from earlier. Why do they hate us and where's the hate come from? I think it's two things. I don't think, first of all, it's not. They don't know you. Okay, most middle class white America does not know Black America. Now, they love to say they do. They love to say, well, I've got Black friends and, I'm not racist. And, then they'll follow something up and they'll say, I'm not racist. I don't care if someone's Black or white or red or yellow or purple. They don't even understand that statement right there in and of itself is a racist statement. Okay. And let me tell you something else I've learned over the last 5-6 years. I'm a history buff, so I get into the history part of it. That's why I tell people to pick up a history book to learn, because it's not Black America's job to educate white America.
Exactly.
And quite frankly, I think you guys will agree with this because I've had this conversation with Black Americans. They're kind of sick of it. Black Americans are kind of sick of it. Like, you guys need to figure it out. And see, I agree with that. I totally agree with that. But if you understand what's going on, right? If you understand how unequal it has been, then you can get through that. But the knee you were talking about, I call it the proverbial knee. Here's what everybody has to understand. Middle-class white America has become, especially in the last 4 years, don't even get me started, has become very entitled. And they don't
say the
really
least
think the rules apply to them. Yeah. And what I realized, because as you guys know, I'm very outspoken against white supremacy, white militias, KKK. It's the resurgence in the last 4 years since 2016 is greater than anything we've seen since Reconstruction. Okay. And for me personally, I look at that and I say, this is totally unacceptable. You guys hear me say this all the time, because diversity is our country's greatest strength. It always has been. But that proverbial knee on the back of the neck that you see from white middle-class America, it's not just literally speaking. I'm not talking about just George Floyd. I figured this out the last couple of years. You know what it's about? And I truly believe in my heart, it's the reason that more white middle-class Americans will not take a stand and speak out against white militias, white supremacy, and the KKK. It's control. It may not be about white supremacy for many of them. They may not associate it that way, but it is absolutely 1000%. No one will convince me otherwise. It is about white control. But here's the caveat. It's not just against Black Americans. It's against all minorities.
It is.
Middle-class white America doesn't understand. It's against middle-class white Americans too. Because if you don't have the car they think you should have, or live in the house, or the income they think you should have, if you can't be a member of the country club, if you can't, keep up with the Joneses and run with the Joneses, they don't want you there either, which is why I've even been more amazed
an identity
of the people that support Donald Trump that are middle-class white Americans, and he has, he could care less about them. He don't care about them. He doesn't want to associate with them. He's been recorded saying he didn't even want to shake their hands because they were gross.
He's even been seen bypassing someone and not shaking.
Yes.
Yeah. You're kidding.
Yes.
It's not funny. It's not funny, but it's funny. But may I say a point to Dave's point? I think it's not just control, but I think it's an identity crisis. I think people like to feel that I'm better than you, or the keeping up with the Joneses. I mean, the keeping up with the Joneses is not just about control. It's about, I know who I am in this society. This is how I relate to other people. And if that changes, then I don't know who I am. Right.
And Shauna, the other thing too, they don't want to deal with it. Okay.
They don't want to, of course not.
That's where white flight came from. They got everything going their way since the country was started. And if you remember back, the last quarter century, 30 years of the 20th century, that's where white flight came from. When minorities started moving into neighborhoods, white flight, white people sold their homes.
It was threatening.
Got out, they went got into their all white communities.
Absolutely.
So they don't want to deal with it. Oh, you've got every opportunity out there. Everything's set up for you. What more do you want? What more could you ask for? I mean, I've been in those conversations with white people, right? And I'm like, no, we're not done yet. There's a lot of work left to do. It's about full and total equality. And to think that just 260 years ago, Black Americans, African Americans were considered 3/5 of a human. Okay. It hadn't been that long. What we talked about, 5 or 6 generations ago, it hasn't been that long. So you're dealing with all this stuff, and it's being taught and passed down generation. That racism is being taught and being passed down. Now, let me say one thing in defense of middle-class white America. Okay. I just want to point out to people.
Funny. Right. Okay.
In the 60s, when the Black Panthers were formed and they started doing protests and having rallies, there was a time where 20 to 30% of the people showing up at those rallies were white people. So there is that segment of white Americans out there that go, hey, this isn't right. We do need justice. We do need equality for all. We do need to follow the words that are written on the Statue of Liberty. And, we need to quit being so racist and so sexist and so misogynistic and so every other ism there is. We need to stop all this, and we need to be working together to move forward.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. And thank you for the middle-class white, comment. It's true. I mean, if we didn't have you guys, the middle-class white people, Biden wouldn't be president-elect. Yeah. Okay. Because if it was just Black people that voted for Biden, he would have lost.
Yeah.
That is true. That is true.
So, we owe a great deal to the middle class white people. You know what? I guess why I'm proud of being a Democrat, I guess, and this goes to what you were saying, Dave. I'm just going to speak it because it's a truth. It just appears that Democrats seem to have more open-mindedness, not just education, but an open-mindedness to say, hey, that we can look at things differently. Even if you don't look at something maybe correctly or what would be construed as being correct, just the fact that your mind was open enough to think of something different.
Yeah.
And that goes back to what you were saying about the identity. We like it this way. We like it, we like to control this way. They're afraid of change. Change is is, that's the
It's
fear of
scary
change.
for some people. Yeah,
You know
definitely.
what?
It's
It
the
is scary,
fear
and
of major change.
it really is. I believe the biggest problem we have in the country, other than the racism part of it, is the entitlement part of it. It's like,
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Okay, here we've got 100 and something thousand new cases of COVID every day, and we've got 1,500, 2,000. I hadn't seen the numbers the last couple of days, the daily numbers, but we got a couple of thousand people that are dying. Okay, we're in a major pandemic. 47 out of 50 states are going the wrong direction. Here in California, we're about to go back on Wednesday. On last Friday, they announced we were just going to have the outdoor dining at restaurants, no indoor dining. Now they came back today and said, as of Wednesday, no indoor dining either. It's only going to be takeout. We've got to get this thing under control. So with all this going on in a worldwide pandemic, explain to me why so many people throw an absolute hissy fit over wearing a damn mask. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
Put on a mask.
I don't get it, but that's a whole nother subject.
Yes,
that's
we have so much work to do here, folks.
That's an example of that entitlement.
We
That's
have a
what
lot of work to do, man.
Yes, exactly.
I told a friend of mine, I said, there's a 1% chance that me wearing a mask protects your mother, your grandmother, your daughter. I'm all in. I'll wear it 24 hours a day. No big deal. But they don't, oh, my rights. Shut up.
Yeah, exactly. So why do you think white people fear Black people? Where does the fear come?
They don't know.
A change. We kind of mentioned that.
Because they don't hang out, they don't spend time.
Identity.
I'm not trying to generalize the entire white race. I know a lot of white people do.
But you are the token white person here, Dave.
Yeah, I just want to. I just want. Don't try to flatter me. I just want to clarify. I just want to clarify that they just don't know. They don't grow up. They don't.
It's intimidating
situations. I mean, Shauna's heard me say it before. V. It's like, don't tell me that the Black person that at the bank. That doesn't count as a friend. That's not somebody you hang out with or break bread with or go to ball games with or go to movies. Like, that's not what they do in their social world.
Right.
If they would get out and spend some time doing that, they're going to find a lot of people they absolutely love, and they're going to want to be around all the time.
Yeah. I always look also, too, at the contributions that Black Americans have contributed to society. I mean, look at all the inventions and all the things that, were created by Black people. Do we get the recognition for some of those things? I mean, the soles of your shoes and, the washing machine, some of the things that are
for the average population,
take it for granted.
They immediately go to the music industry and they immediately go to sports. And again, look at some history.
It's true. I'm not laughing, but it's true. I mean, that's where the big impact is.
There's movies that have made, now about what happened at NASA in the space programs and inventions that have furthered our society. Like, it's just crazy that people can't just take a step back and take a breath and give credit where credit is due.
And also too, since we're talking a little bit about that, I also believe that we're like the younger generation, even my generation, we didn't really learn a lot about our history and all the contributions to society that, we had to do that in a separate type of class. It was always an elective. It wasn't one of the courses, and I think you had mentioned this before, Sean, it wasn't one of the courses that you had to take. Everyone should have learned about African American history, but that is so stripped from our curriculum going forward. I mean, back and going forward, they don't talk about it. You got to do your own.
They're more comfortable with us being homogenized than with us being individuals. Yeah. Once you have the individual that has the voice, that's the one person that, can elicit change. And change is what they've been trying to keep from happening for so long. Okay. Yeah. I mean, Obama's platform was what? Was it change? Yes, we can. Change. I remember he had a poster or some poster of him that said something about change. And I think that really is one of the main points, Venus, is that people have, and I want to go back to this point because I think it's so important. when you feel that your identity is threatened, you will hate everybody. Okay, because you don't know yourself, Dave. And that's like you said, they don't know people, but they don't know themselves enough. They have to pick all these pieces out from all these other definitions. Okay, and so we're kind of we have lost ourselves, so we're easily tracked. It's a control thing from a much higher source, Dave. It's not just like white people wanting to control Black people. It's the system. I mean, we're talking about systemic, i.e. the word systemic racism,
Donna, the system was always white. That's why I say that.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay. White. I'm sorry. I mean, you got that.
Always. I mean, going all the way back. I mean, look at the movie 12 Years a Slave. Look how have you seen it? Look how he was free, and they just brainwashed him to make him believe he was still a slave.
Exactly.
The poor man. I thought that movie was deep. This man lost 12 years of his life with his family because they just robbed him of his freedom. Yeah. That was just a terrible movie, but that's just on that scale. But look how
it's gone on recently. Okay, that's the problem I have. Listen, I gave you another good example. Okay, Ahmaud Arbery, the kid down in Georgia near Savannah, jogging through his neighborhood that was run down. He was murdered by these guys. Turns out the dad of the dad and the son that were in the truck that ran him down.
Oh, you're talking about recent.
Yeah, I'm talking about recent.
Yeah, this is like this year, right? Year? Okay, yeah.
What year is it? I don't know what year it is. But anyway, you guys know the story. Okay, he was run down. He was murdered because he's jogging through his neighborhood. So
yes.
So if you know this story, and I've read quite a bit about it, so the dad had been with the police force in this town down there. Okay, and initially when this happened, they tried to cover it up, and the reason that we now know they tried to cover it up is because the initial police report was that when they went to the kid's mother at his home, they said that he was shot. He had broken into this house and was shot in the house. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. That all came out because nobody knew they had filmed it. Okay, here's my point. I'm not for defunding police. Okay. I'm not stupid. I know we need our police departments. We need more training. We need more cultural diversity and training along those lines, social training. But I tell you what I am for. I'm for defunding that police department. I'm for defunding police departments in Alabama, in Mississippi that have behaved.
There's accountability.
I am for putting those guys out of a job. You with me? Okay. And by the way, that's the same if it's New York, if it's Detroit, if it's Michigan. I am for defunding those departments, letting somebody else take over and making sure those people never work in law enforcement again. Period. That's my stance on it. But I'm not for defunding police across the board.
Mm-hmm. Is this getting way off track? But I want to ask you a question, Dave. Do you think all police cars should have mounted cameras?
Yes.
So that we can make sure that yes, you do.
And I think they should all. I think most of them do now have cameras on their uniforms. But I'll take it a step further. I think they should all have mounted cameras all over the police car.
I agree.
I think they should have cameras all over uniforms. And if a camera gets turned off at any given
notice
in a shift, it should be automatic suspension and review of why that officer behaved that way. I mean, I just think you've got to really draw out the parameters in which they operate. I really do.
Yeah, I believe that.
I think it's not. We know a lot of them are good guys, right? We know there's a lot of good cops out there. Okay, but the good cops have their hands tied by that bad element because here's the mentality: they're watching each other's back. They're right. They go out on a shooting situation. Okay, a domestic situation. And they got to have each other's back. And the fear is that the bad guys won't have the good guys back. So that's why it all kind of gets swept under. Again, we're getting off track a little bit, but it does tie in. It does tie into the big picture. I really believe that.
It's all connected. It's all connected. It's all part of the system.
It is. It definitely is.
It's all connected. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
So I know that we all agree we have an issue, but how do you see us bridging the gap of racism.
I
And I know.
I said to some friends of mine this past weekend, guys that follow me on social media and that call me all the time. One of them is in Mississippi that I grew up with, a couple of other states, other places. Here's what worries me, and I'll give you the positive and the negative. Here's the negative first, okay? I, at this moment in time, cannot see the division that exists in this country right now healing itself in my lifetime. It's just the last couple of years for me, people that I always thought a lot of, that I thought were very smart, that I thought were good people.
I'm
that,
sorry.
They have lost their damn minds. I mean, I'm just telling
so
you, it's
sorry.
like it's the equivalent of Jim Jones in Guyana and drinking the Kool-Aid, and they're supporting this guy who is he wants them to drink the Kool-Aid, but he's going to be over there drinking champagne, and they don't really even get that part.
Yeah.
I hate to say that because I know that sounds so pessimistic, but until something dramatic happens to truly bring Americans together, until more people want to bridge that gap, I think individually, government can't force it. People have to have it in here. People have to have it in here to love thy neighbor and treat others.
May I say something on that, Dave?
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. The reason I agree with you is because 70 million people voted for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because 70 million.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, Biden beat Trump by 10 million votes?
6 million votes, yeah.
But it should have been 50 million votes.
Yeah. So we won. We're happy.
If we had made the change that we're talking about here today, it should have been a fucking wipeout. Excuse my language, but it should have been a wipeout. It should have been no question. I should have been able to sleep on election night without any friggin' problem.
A lot of people are thinking the same thing, including me, though, Shauna. A lot of people. Now, let me give you the good side. Let me give you the flip side. I do really believe that the good people out there, regardless of skin color, which, by the way, we won that election fair and square.
Thank you.
We kicked some booty in that election.
Yes, we did.
They have spoken. Okay. When I see, when I see the state of Georgia turn blue, something I never thought I would see in my lifetime.
Right.
That gives me hope. But I will say this: I truly do believe that if there has ever been a time in the history of this country that this country was ripe for those positive changes and actions to really start to take place. And it's not going to be easy, and it can't be lip service, and it's going to be a grind, and there's a lot of work left to do from all of us that feel this way. And that starts with voting in every single election we have to stay on top and be able to keep controlling the decisions that are made by our governments, local, state, and federal. Okay. And I say that because January 5th in Georgia, we got the race with the senators coming up, and Georgia's got to come through again. They got to vote Democratic. They got to turn blue again.
Absolutely.
Because it's going to be a tough 4 years if we don't get Georgia and get these Democratic senators in there on January 5th. But I really believe the time is right. I really believe that the true patriots in this country have spoken. Now we just can't take a breath and stop paying attention. We've got to keep our foot on the pedal and keep moving forward, because I don't think the time has ever been better to really see some true change. And my attitude about it, guys, is if people want to come along, come on, baby, let's go.
Right.
And the people that don't,
it's a new way. We have to be different. Correct. Exactly.
Well, one of the things that I always say is that, even though we can, express how racism affects us as Black people and how we feel about it and how we want change, I truly believe that the conversation begins with white people. They have to start talking to each other one by one, have these consistent conversations among each other, because they're the ones who really need to change. I mean, we have our own views, but, it's them that hate us. I don't lose any sleep at night, but, it's the dislike that they have for, our skin tone, or people that look like me and Shauna and other people. But I believe the conversation needs to start there, and it has to start, like you said, the groundwork starts from within, because if they have the love, then they'll see a change needs to happen, and then they'll start to talk about it. To me, I don't know, what do you guys think about
Well,
that?
Vic, guess what? I got news for you. They hate me now because
Oh,
they've
they
been
do,
listening to me on
Dave.
social media
Oh,
for 4
yeah,
years.
Oh,
I
they
go
do.
hard on social
Oh,
media.
they do.
They're not happy with me at all.
Yes,
But
you
they
are.
need you so badly, Dave. They need you so badly. You are such a facilitator of
You'll
that.
never convince them. The ones that you see on my threads, okay,
Yes.
you'll never convince them. They're going to tell you they're
That's
not
okay.
racist and they're
And
whatever.
I was just
You
going to
know
say
what?
something about that, Dave.
Go ahead, Shauna.
Thank you. Just 1 second.
No,
I
go
think
ahead.
what has happened, yes, 70 million people voted for Trump. But I think the beautiful thing about that is that it's finally now exposed.
Yeah.
I think he did us a huge favor by exposing all of this junk and by getting it out. It was always there, but it was like a giant pimple that just finally popped. And now we got to clean up and heal and figure it out what we're going to do. But
I
it
agree
was
with
finally
you.
exposed.
I agree with you. The thing for me when he won in 2016, it
I
wasn't.
just,
It wasn't that. You know what? If he kept his mouth shut and just done his job, we wouldn't even be at this point. Honestly,
Exactly.
I'm gonna tell
if
you
he
what
had
would
given
happen.
one iota of a crap, we wouldn't be here right now.
Well, here's the thing. Okay, if he had kept his mouth shut, gotten off Twitter, and focused on doing the job of president, and hadn't
Absolutely.
spent every single day of his presidency trying to piss somebody off or offend somebody, I hate to say this, but I'm just telling you, history shows it. You know what would have happened? The Democrats wouldn't have had the turnout in this last election that they did, and he would be
Right.
in a second term.
Yes,
He would
they
be in a
would.
second term because they wouldn't have voted. They wouldn't have gone to the polls. They'd have been like, yeah, no big deal. If it hadn't really affected them or affected their life, okay, we'd be 4 more years of Trump. Now, in that regard, you're right. He exposed it. I think the disappointing thing for me is when I saw some of the behavior around him winning in 2016, it was disappointing for me personally because I truly, in my heart, it wasn't that I was so devastated because Donald Trump had won. I really thought that we were further down the road as a
Thank
country
you.
and a society, and it woke me up that, man, was I wrong? Whew.
Yes.
I mean, I was
It
really
seemed
wrong.
like we done took a couple turns backwards.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
It
ma'am.
seems like we have gone backwards in so many areas. But, like you said, we have to start moving forward somewhere. It has to start somewhere, so.
And it starts here, man. I mean, I think this is Dave, the reason Venus and I are even friends is because of you. Because you have and unapologetically have been stating your truth, and a truth that people need to hear, but people don't like it. You're not gonna have maybe a lot of friends. You'll have a lot of followers.
I mean, listen, I know this is going to come as a shock to you
we
guys.
need it.
I know this is going to come as a shock.
People need you, Dave.
I'm very type A, okay? But part of what I do on social media is also by design with some of the things that are kind of off the wall and a little harsh that I say, my language sometimes, because what I'm trying to do, I know how to piss them off. So when I piss them off, I draw them out and expose them. And that's exactly what my best friend called me 2 years ago. He called me one day. He goes, shoot, I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing. You're just trying to piss people off. I go, yeah, that's true. That's the best part because I'm trying to draw that out and get them in those conversations to kind of expose what's really going on. And, is that the right way to approach it? Sometimes, is it the right way all the time? I don't know. I'm me. It is. That's what I do. When I put my head on the pillow at night, I sleep just fine. So it is what it is. It is what it is.
I think it's working. And I think I think what you're doing, Dave, is you're bringing people, not only are you making them think differently, which is what we were trying to do here. It's like, how do we get people to think differently about something they've been thinking the same way their whole lives? Okay.
Right.
And sometimes, and oftentimes, a large percentage of the time, if you make people angry enough, anger is a facilitator of change.
But you know what you guys said a minute ago is true. I mean, it's time for middle class white Americans. If I'm wrong and you're not like that, it's time for you guys to speak up. And it's not just to
Absolutely.
speak up to say, I'm not a racist, I have black friends. It's time for you to take a stand and say, we got to get rid of white supremacy, KKK, white militias in this country. Having these guys walking around with AR-15s and AK-47s because they're in a white militia, they're barging the state house steps in the state of Michigan. We all know the story of what the FBI uncovered there. Then if you feel that way and you're not racist, then it's time for you to take a stand and speak out against that type of behavior.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is a human race.
That's
Exactly.
you said a couple of things there. Go ahead, Venus. What were you going to say, love?
Go ahead.
You hit a couple of things. It's like, not only if you don't say anything, you're complicit.
Yeah.
You're complicit.
Yeah.
You're just as guilty.
If we didn't know that, we learned it the last 4 years, didn't we?
We learned it. Yes, we learned in the last 4 weeks, man. I mean, it's amazing how these Republicans are thinking that they can still do this. Like with what's his face? What's Lindsey Graham, the one that tried to do that, whatever the hell that was in Georgia? That's a crime. Okay.
Listen, Lindsey Graham, Rand Paul, Jim Jordan. I could go.
Of course.
We were promised the swamp was going to get drained,
right?
And it got fertilized. It got fertilized. Come on.
Yeah.
Right. Girl, what were you going to say? I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. This is a conversation.
I didn't want to interrupt you.
We're doing it together. But like you said, for everyone to understand that it's all about ignorance. Some people, I think we can all agree that when they don't understand Black people and try to understand and have an open heart to just even be aware of how we can all work together and just be one human race. Just, it's not a split. It's not division. Just come together. And like you said, I think it's just understanding, taking the time to learn who we are, even in our differences. Just learn each other, take some time to understand and talk to one another. I think that comes with understanding, communicating, and talking to one another.
I think you'll guys.
Go ahead, Dave.
I think you'll.
We have a lot of preconceived ideas. They have a lot of preconceived ideas about us. And, like I said before, is, when you see a white woman could be walking down the street and see two black men coming, she automatically think that something's going to happen because of what she's conditioned to believe. So I think a lot of it is conditioning. I think, Dave, we all mentioned it before about his brainwash from as a child.
We got to deprogram.
We got to deprogram. Media, what you see at the theater.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yep.
And so it's time to strip ourselves of all that negative thinking and strip ourselves of all the stories that we've told ourselves. And we need to just have a new fresh slate. To be honest.
Ma'am, that's it. You got to strip away the positive because that's an illusion. You got to strip away the negative because that's an illusion, and just ground zero.
Yes, appreciate the history, understand where we all have come from, where we all have been, and just realize where we are today and just embrace it. And I think we all said before that it's the beauty of our diversity that makes it, that makes it good and makes it really just work. Can you imagine if we just all one people, just one, all white, just all, it just works well. We're like a mixing pot, a melting pot.
It's happening. I believe it's happening. And you know what? I believe we want it to happen. You've got to want the change in order for the change to happen. And I think a majority, Dave, going to your point, I think a majority want the change. I think we want it to be better. I don't think we want the George Floyds. I don't think we want it to be this way. And I think that's why people are standing up. And I think, going to your point, why Biden won in a landslide. And yes, it was a landslide. Yes, we did kick their ass because people do want change. They do. They may not know how to get it. And they may not know how to start.
I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm a big Malcolm X fan. Okay.
Oh, we know. Yes.
Yeah.
I've read books.
Yes.
I've read books, and I love his story. You know, most people don't know, like my family, people that I've known, and friends out here. I got in this conversation a week ago with a friend of mine here in California. I had one of the hats on, and he goes, well, he's like, "What are you wearing, man? You know, have you forgotten that you're white?" And I said, "Yeah, but you don't understand the story. You don't know the story, do you?" And he didn't. He didn't know any history. And I said, "Look, here's a kid. He grew up. His father was a pastor in Nebraska. His father was killed by white supremacists in Nebraska when he was a kid. Okay. I think it was mom. I think he had 3 siblings. They tied his father. He was a pastor who spoke out against racism and trying to get people to register to vote. Right. And they tied him to a railroad track, and a train ran over him. That's how they killed him. Okay. So as horrible as you can get, just another situation, right? These stories you hear from the history of America. But the mom ends up emotionally, mentally, she lost her mind. Like they had to put her in a home. Why wouldn't she? You know, she's left with all these kids to take care of, and the breadwinner's gone, or love of her life's gone.
Yeah.
And so the kid, he gets put into foster care, and he goes down this road as a teenager where he ends up going to New York, where he got in trouble for a simple robbery. He went to prison, which is where he found the Nation of Islam. But he had this, as a teenager and a young adult, he had this kind of checkered, biography. But he found something that he related to. And I've told people before, I'm like, they're like, man, you know a lot about the guy, his history. I'm like, yeah. I said, I'd probably be NOI, but the giving up bacon thing, I don't know if I can do, but that's a whole nother conversation. But here's what I love about
he's one of us, Venus. You do know that, right, baby? Okay, I'm just saying.
Here's what I love about his story. Malcolm X actually believed in segregation. He believed that Black Americans should segregate. They should stay in their neighborhoods, their parts of the city, and they needed to stop. All you got to do is listen to his speeches. Go read or listen to his speeches. But it was on his journey to Mecca, where he went to the homeland for the first time, and he met people from all over the world that were Black, that were white, that were from India. And it was there where the light kind of went on for him that, yes, people from different places and different color of skin can get along, and they can care about each other, and they can love each other. And it changed his whole persona. The only challenge we had is that he began to get so big because he was such a great speaker and he had such a great following. He was assassinated. I'm sure anybody that knows that story. As most great speakers and orators were back in the 60s,
of course,
right? Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers,
of course.
But Malcolm was the by any means necessary. It was like, it was like Dr. King was always peace, 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 peaceful, peaceful. And Malcolm was cool. Malcolm was not instigating, rioting or fighting or murder or killing, but he did draw that line in the sand to say enough is enough. Don't mess with us, or we're going to stand up and do something about it. And I love the guy. I love that story. I love that. That's why I've kind of latched onto that, because to me, that's kind of where we're at right now. It's going to be by any means necessary. If you want to join us and do the right thing and treat people the right way, come with us. And if you don't, you know what?
You will be left behind.
I end up as a 60-year-old man standing in the streets of America, shoulder to shoulder with Black Americans. I'm good with that too. I'm totally fine with it.
Yeah.
I'm totally fine with it.
I agree. I hope to see it in my lifetime. I hope to see that, a different type of society that we're living in, and just kind of excluding racism. It would be wonderful to have a different type of society, where we're all appreciating each other for our differences and respecting each other. And before we go, because I know we're winding down, but I think we kind of tackled on some things, and I think we started the conversation. And I know that, Dave, you have a platform and that you're going to grow and do great things and to, impact so many people. And Shauna, your platform, you will too. And we're just getting started. I believe that this is a great conversation, and I think this is where the conversation needs to start, and it needs to be in a transparent conversation. Really just be open and honest about everything, because I think that's when you're open and honest, people can really feel that and begin to feel some sense of change and want to feel compelled to change. And that's what we're all about, So kudos to us, right?
Yeah, we are the
we just gotta
facilitators of change.
we just got to keep it going. And, you could literally do a series of podcasts like this where we could talk about this stuff and pick a different kind of element of the topics every time. There's so much. And that's why I said earlier.
Isn't that the plan? Aren't you already doing that, Venus? I mean, same bat time, same bat channel.
It's so important right now to do that because the work is just beginning. Okay.
Yes,
we finally got to a point where we said enough is enough. People went to the polls on November 3rd and they voted and said, we do not want to be this country. But that was the very first tiny step in a journey that's going to be a very long journey and a lot of steps of things that need to be addressed. And we can't let up now. We can't let up now.
Right. We can't.
No, we cannot. We're just getting started, Dave.
Yes,
you can't stop, Dave. We can't stop, Venus. We have to,
We can't.
I hope we do this weekly. What's that, love?
Yes. We just started the groundwork and we have some work to do. But before we go, I just have one question for you. What will be your hope for the world?
Dave?
You
go first.
What is your one hope for the world?
I can only pick one.
Just one.
Well, you said you said something earlier that I think would fit as at least part of the answer to that question. It's just I wish people would just open their minds. I just wish people, in the long term, in the struggle in this journey we're talking about, I wish people would take a breath. The ones that are Christian, I wish they would revisit their Bible and read a little bit about what it says about loving thy neighbor and treating people like you want to be treated, and actually not just talk it, right, but apply some of what that book says to what we need to do moving forward. In the short term, we have got to get this pandemic under control, and we've got to work together as Americans, all Americans. Okay. No matter, what color your skin is or where you're from, we've got to work together short term to get this thing under control. So I guess there's one for the short term and then the other for the long term.
See, there you go.
You got two.
Not two in there.
You got two. That's what I'm saying, right?
How about you, Shauna?
I'm going to piggyback on Dave's. I'm going to say that I hope that people can choose consciousness. Want and choose consciousness. Because when you're conscious, you don't make choices that are unconscious. Does that make sense? I know that's kind of
no, it does. It does. You're aware.
Because of your awareness. Once you're aware, you get it.
Yes.
You actually want more knowledge.
Yeah.
And knowledge is power.
Yes.
And that's when you make change, So on what we're talking about, I hope that more people will choose consciousness.
V, if people just be nice. And listen, there's a lot of people that may see this, they're going to come back and go, well, you be nice. And they're right. I need to be nice too. Okay.
Yeah.
If everybody would just be nice. Honestly, if everybody would just take a breath and let the pay it forward concept and just be nice, and be polite and try to get along, man.
Yes.
Make so much
Shouldn't be that hard, Dave. And
Venus, I'm just so mad right now because you just took mine. Mine was be kind.
Okay.
That's different.
You took three. You took three.
Let me tell you why I said this. I don't know if things have changed, if you feel some type of shift in the atmosphere, since the election. People have a different type of attitude now. So I was going into the store and people are, holding doors. A white lady held the door for me and I was like, thank you. She goes, oh, no problem. It was just that kindness and you felt it. It was different. But leading up to the election, it was just tension. I have this thing that I do on Tuesdays called Social Vibes. And I was trying to express to them, do you guys feel some type of tension when you go into the store? It's almost like you're getting these glares. I don't know if they're looking at me because they think I'm pretty or they're looking at me because I'm black. I don't know which one. but now it's almost like I just want everyone just to be kind to one another because that's so important.
I think we're so relieved And so we can be kind. I think
Yeah.
when we're so tensed up because before the election is what you said, the tense people, Trump supporters are still angry. They're very, very, very angry. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, at least you know to avoid them. Okay. You know which direction to go. But I
Yeah.
think people are so relieved
Yeah.
and they
Yeah, we
can
are.
be kind
Shauna,
now.
I think there's a lot of Trump supporters out there that are relieved and they just don't feel like they can say that out loud.
Yeah, they're in the
Relieved
closet.
that what he's not president or
Yeah.
relieved.
No, I think they're
Really?
relieved that he's on his way out.
Yeah.
Trump
Listen,
supporters?
it
Did I hear that correctly?
Let me tell you, it has nothing to do with red or blue or Democrat or
I'm
Republican.
sorry. I just wanted to make
Right
sure I
or
heard that
wrong?
correctly.
It's right
Okay,
or wrong.
right.
It's all about
Right
right
or
and
wrong.
wrong. And
That's
I think
right.
there's a large
It's
percentage
right
of
or
them
wrong.
that are glad
That's
he's
right.
out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, guys, it's coming up on the hour, but I want to thank you so much for being a part of the Where Truth Lives podcast. I will make sure to put your links on the show notes, and we will have to do this again, but I want to thank you so much for spending some time with me this evening. It has been a joy, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Any last words
Absolutely.
before you leave today?
You have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And Dave,
You guys
your
too.
spread looked really nice. Yeah. If
We'll
you
be
want to
eating off
save
of it
some
for
of
a
that.
week.
Yeah, that was nice.
That's up 15
We're
pounds.
going
I
to
didn't
Dave's
eat.
house.
No, listen, thanks for having us. Listen, this is great.
Yes,
I love
thank
the
you
Yeah,
very
conversation.
I
much.
loved it.
It
Gina.
is absolutely
Thank you.
phenomenal, constructive conversation. We need to
Yes,
keep
it
it up.
is. And we must continue and be good to each other, be good to everyone. Have a wonderful holiday, and we'll do this again soon. Have a
All right,
good
guys.
night.
Well, love you.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys.
Bye,
You have a good
guys.
night.
Bye-bye.
You rock, by the way.